Pedro Munhoz versus Jimmie Rivera 2. The rematch takes place this weekend on the main card of UFC Fight Night Vegas 20, Rozenstruik versus Gane. And I can't wait for this bantamweight bout. The rematch is upon us. We were supposed to have it earlier this year. It was supposed to be on the UFC 258 card. It got rescheduled to that one. Now it's been rescheduled over to this card, and I'm very glad that it's been rescheduled onto this card. And hopefully it does end up happening, because I don't know if you guys have heard the news, but Raoni Barcelos is out of his fight, and so is Randy Brown. So we need every fight we can get on the card this weekend, because I thought we were in for a good card, stacked, filled with fun fights and big names for once, but no, it's striking again. The 2021 era of the UFC and the 2020 era as well. All of these fights are dropping like flies, so we need this one on the card. This is a great rematch. I've been looking forward to it for a while. Pedro Munhoz versus Jimmie Rivera. Let's talk about the first fight before we get into anything. But let me just say who I think is going to win, because I don't want to blue ball you guys. Jimmie Rivera is going to win this bout, in my opinion. I think he gets the job done by unanimous decision. I think he wins the first 2 rounds of this bout. I think Pedro Munhoz will come on strong in the later round. I think I could even see him winning the 3rd round. I think Jimmie Rivera will win this bout 29-28, securing himself the first 2, losing the 3rd once Munhoz's pressure eventually gets to him. But in my opinion, Pedro Munhoz really needs 5-round bouts to implement his game plan, which is a pressure style, breaking guys down, lands the leg kicks, lands the front kicks to the body, wears you down, wears you down, wears you down. I know people know him for the KO that he got over Cody Garbrandt, but that is not something that regularly happens in Pedro Munhoz's career. Oftentimes, he breaks guys down, eventually tries to get to them throughout the duration of the fight, and I thought he did that against Frankie Edgar very well. Chopped at the legs early. I thought he won the 1st round pretty clearly. I thought he won the 2nd, 3rd, or not the 2nd. I thought he lost the 2nd round to Frankie Edgar, but won the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. So I don't know how on earth, in any way, they scored that fight for Frankie Edgar. I think it's one of the biggest robberies of all time, but I still believe that Jimmie Rivera gets this one done in the first fight. Very competitive, very close. Jimmie Rivera, 25-year-old man. Pedro Munhoz, I believe, was 29 at the time. Both guys not really in their prime yet. Jimmie Rivera definitely nowhere near his prime. Was a baby in the sport at the time that they first fought, and he even got the win then. I think we're going to see a repeat here, because it's exactly the same style matchup. Neither guy has really changed that much whatsoever, maybe other than some minor things. Neither guy has really changed that much whatsoever, and this time Pedro Munhoz is 34, coming off more damage, and Jimmie Rivera is 31 in his prime. I don't see a way that Pedro Munhoz pulls this one off. He's got a reach disadvantage right now with a 3.5 inches, and 3.5 inches at bantamweight is a long reach advantage to have. Jimmie Rivera gifted in the length of his arms, mainly his shoulders as well, but still the arm length is pretty crazy. He's got a great reach and great boxing as well. I think he goes out there and pieces up Munhoz in the first 2 rounds, losing the 3rd. But the first 2 rounds of their first fight, let's talk about their first fight that they had together, because it was a good one. Jimmie Rivera all over him in round 1. All over him in round 1. It was a good round, don't get me wrong, and Munhoz was landing his shots here and there, but it was very obvious in the first round of their first fight that Jimmie Rivera was all over him in the boxing combinations, landing combination punches, landing good shots non-stop, even over-doubled him in significant strikes in the first round. In the second round, Jimmie Rivera is doing exactly the same thing, but this time, Pedro Munhoz catches him behind the ear, and Rivera sort of slips to one leg at one moment. It wasn't called an official knockdown, but it was kind of and you know how they don't score knockdowns nowadays, like McGregor's Khabib's knockdown against McGregor is not scored as a knockdown, even though we kind of know it was a knockdown. Like, technically Munhoz didn't knock down Jimmie Rivera, but he knocked down Jimmie Rivera for a split second, but Rivera got back up straight away, got right back to work. If not for that knockdown, I would comfortably give him that 2nd round. In the 3rd round, I feel like he could also win that one. I thought it could have been 30-27 Rivera, but I'll settle for a 29-28 because Munhoz did clip him in the 2nd. I thought he could even win the 3rd round, but again, it was a close round of the fight. However, I think this time the difference is going to be that Pedro Munhoz goes to the legs more. Back then, he was throwing a lot more shots to the head that I'm used to seeing from Pedro Munhoz. I was trying to find the differences in both of them since their first fight to now. I've noticed that Jimmie Rivera paces himself way more, looks to land more of an accurate percentage of his shots, doesn't just throw a bunch of combinations. He waits until he knows he can land. He's a lot more patient than he was back then, and I feel like Munhoz this time has gone in the future. Munhoz has changed his style to adapt more to this more to the leg kicks. He used to throw a lot to the head. He doesn't really do that anymore. He throws to the head sometimes, but the majority of his shots usually are to those legs. And I think if he does go to the legs early and avoids the boxing scenario with Jimmie Rivera early, he will lose the early rounds. But I think the leg kicks that he will land will be too many, and he'll eventually start doing quite well in the third round. I just don't see him beating Jimmie Rivera in either of the first two. While they're both fresh, I think Jimmie Rivera showed in his last bout that he's way better than Pedro Munhoz while they're both fresh in the first two rounds. Other than getting clipped in the second, I think that Jimmie Rivera has been a lot more defensively sound. He's not coming off any damage in his last bout against Cody Stamann, which is a new thing for Jimmie Rivera, because normally when you're predicting a fight for Jimmie Rivera, you've got to think, well, he was coming off a lot of damage against Gane, where he got dropped twice, and he was coming off a lot of damage against Marlon Moraes when he got head kick KO'd, and other than that, he hasn't really been hurt too much in his career, but he has got a little bit of a problem here and there with taking some shots. I don't see Pedro Munhoz catching him on the chin and finishing him here. I think if you were going to catch Jimmie Rivera on the chin and finish him, you're going to catch a guy like Frankie Edgar on the chin and finish him as well. And the only reason Pedro Munhoz really got a KO against Cody Garbrandt was because they were just swinging like maniacs, and someone's going to get a KO in that situation because Garbrandt goes full Garbrandt mode. And also I want to mention the headbutt that they clashed heads with before that fight, or before the ending sequence of that fight happened with him and Garbrandt. They clashed heads really badly. Garbrandt got quite badly rocked from the headbutt between the pair of them, because I guess Munhoz's head is harder than Cody Garbrandt's one is. And then they started swinging like crazy. So as much as I give credit to Munhoz for the KO, I don't really, you know what I mean? Like, he got the head clash, they both started swinging like morons, it happened. Great win from Pedro Munhoz, don't get me wrong, but I just don't see that translating over to the Jimmie Rivera fight, because he's way more technical in the boxing department. He's very defensively crisp. I know he gets a little bit lazy now and again at the end of the rounds, but Gane made a conscious effort to set traps for him and catch him at the end of those rounds. I just don't think Pedro Munhoz is going to be able to land with the same technique or efficiency that Gane did on Jimmie Rivera. And even Gane was getting outlanded before those shots landed. You know what I mean? Like, he caught Jimmie Rivera at the end of the first round and the end of the second. But other than that, Jimmie Rivera was comfortably outstriking Gane for the majority of that bout, even in the third round. I know Gane knew that he'd won the third round, which is probably why he took it off and let Jimmie Rivera sort of control it a bit more. But still, I mean, Gane knew that he'd won the first and second, so he didn't need to grit down and trade with Rivera to earn himself the third round if he knows he's already won the first two. So that was a little bit of that. But still, Jimmie Rivera did well against Gane on the feet in those first two rounds. Very good. And I don't think Pedro Munhoz is on the same level of striking as a guy like Jimmie Rivera is. And one thing about Pedro Munhoz, his jiu-jitsu is dangerous, but you have to shoot on him. You have to. He rarely ever goes for takedowns. He rarely ever gets takedowns on people either. I don't see him getting a takedown on Jimmie Rivera, who's been out there with guys like, in his last fight, Cody Stamann, a great wrestler in the division, and he wasn't really able to control Jimmie Rivera on the ground for any time whatsoever. I mean, he got him down here and there, but Rivera was in good position, never gave up like a mount situation or anything like that. He was sort of just held against a cage in certain moments like he was against Aljamain Sterling, but he gets out of them. He stays safe in those positions. He doesn't give up any positions like the back or anything like that. Very good from Jimmie Rivera in that fight against Cody Stamann. Defended the takedowns well. 1 out of 5 from Cody Stamann, and Cody Stamann was a guy who was out grappling Aljamain Sterling in the early part of that fight before he got a little bit tired as the fight went on. And I think the only real difference I can tell between this rematch and the first one is that now Jimmie Rivera is in his prime and better than ever. Pedro Munhoz is past his prime and has been in some entertaining fights and some battles and some wars. I mean, Aljamain Sterling landed 174 significant strikes on him. Frankie Edgar landed 135 significant strikes on him. I know he's not getting rocked, but still, for a 34-year-old to be hit with a combined total of what? Let me do some quick maths here. He got hit with a combined total of 206 shots, I want to say. Is my maths completely wrong here? Or is my maths completely correct? 135 plus 170 is 205 plus the 4 on top. So 209 significant strikes in his last two bouts. A lot of shots to get hit with. I feel like the cardio of Jimmie Rivera is way better now than it was back then. I think that's something that he's been forced to address in his career because he's been held down so much and been out-cardioed in a lot of bouts. Like Gane didn't really out-cardio him, but he sort of put the pressure on Rivera at the end of the first and the second round. And I feel like now Jimmie Rivera's addressed that cardio problem. Didn't look like he was was slowing down against Cody Stamann, and I think he's going to go out there and get the job done against Pedro Munhoz with relative ease. I know Munhoz has got good leg kicks, but I think Rivera's boxing and movement is going to be good enough to get him out of trouble, securing those first 2 rounds. Third round gets a little bit risky. I don't see a 10-8. I don't see a finish. I think Munhoz wins the third, but Munhoz needs 5-round bouts, and I think the winner of this one is going to be about to get a great fight for themselves in the bantamweight division, because right now at bantamweight, I reckon the winner of this one's going to get like a Rob Font or something. The bantamweight division right now is on fire. We got Sandhagen looking for a title shot. Cody Garbrandt's going to get a fight. TJ Dillashaw's coming back. You've got Jose Aldo coming off a win right now in the division. I think the winner of this one's going to get the least big name out of all of the top guys in the division, and I assume that that's going to be Rob Font versus the winner of Munhoz versus Rivera. It makes sense in my opinion, and I think it probably will happen. It's a great fight, and I think that should happen next, because I like Rob Font, but you did beat Moraes 2 months removed from a KO loss to Corey Sandhagen. You're not going to get a title shot next. You're probably going to be the guy that we have to see fight the winner of this one. Plus, if Pedro Munhoz wins, Munhoz beat Rob Font by guillotine in the first round. So all the more reason to make that rematch anyway. But if Jimmie Rivera wins, he beat a guy that Rob Font lost to, and that looks really good for him. But then again, Rob Font beat a guy in Marlon Moraes that Jimmie Rivera lost to. So that also looks pretty good. So let's figure it out amongst themselves. Rob Font versus Jimmie Rivera. I think that's a great fight to make, and I'll look forward to it. Jimmie Rivera is a great fighter, and I think he'll go out there and get the job done this weekend. In his prime, I just used a Beneil Dariush versus Diego Ferreira fight as an example here. That it's just like we've seen the fight happen. We watched the fight happen, and Jimmie Rivera won other than getting clipped in the second round. And if he doesn't get clipped in the second round, I think he just wins it even more convincingly. So I'll go 29-28 Jimmie Rivera. Wins the first 2 rounds with ease. Third round comes around, gets a bit hairy, but, you know, he'll survive the third round. He's tough enough. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. The winner of this one gets Rob Font. And for the loser of this one, which is crazy to say, because if Pedro Munhoz loses, he'll be on a 3-fight losing streak in the division, and he should not be, because he was coming off a win against Frankie Edgar that was such a bad robbery, and no one brings it up. They brought up Andre Ewell versus like Chris Gutierrez on the UFC panel show, but not Edgar versus Munhoz, the worst of the year in my opinion. I think if Munhoz loses, there could be like a Rafael Assunção bout in the future for him. Maybe a bout with, I don't fucking know what he's going to do. If Cruz loses and wants another fight, I don't know if that would be a good one for him. Maybe a rematch with Frankie Edgar. If Edgar, I don't even know what's going to happen in the bantamweight division. We've got a lot of guys that are kind of clinging on right now that need to be gotten rid of. And I think that Rivera will do the job against Munhoz this weekend. Glad it's on the card because, yeah, I hate the fact that they don't overstack cards in preparation for fights to be taken off. It really does get on my fucking nerves. There's going to be about 5 cancellations, UFC. $4 billion company. Add a couple extra fights so we still have a card left by the time we get to the card. We've still got weigh-ins to go. After last weekend's weigh-ins, we've still got weigh-ins to go, and we've already lost Raoni Barcelos and Randy Brown. Like and subscribe. Click that button up there. Goodbye. I'll see you later.